Hi, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Kimberly Roa Tejera. I'm your host for today's Library and Archives lunch hour, Carmen Pabón, La Madrina de Loisaida. As many of you know, Carmen Pabón, dubbed La Madrina de Loisaida, was a community leader who transformed a vacant lot into a community garden with the intention of creating a leisure space for children and older adults. The garden, named El Bello Amanecer Boriqueño Garden, provided food, clothing, and support for the unhoused of New York City. Today, we are joined by CENTRO Archivist Herbert Durán and volunteer and board member of the Carmen Pabón del Amanecer Garden, Gabriela Sanchez. I invite you to welcome them, and I hope you enjoy this event.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm going to share my screen real quick. All right, good afternoon. Again, thank you, Kimberly. Like Kimberly said, my name is Herbert Durán. I'm the archivist at Centro. For today's Library and Archives lunch hour, we'll be discussing Carmen Pabón and her contributions to community gardens and activism here in New York. Pabon's a self-proclaimed social worker without a license, and she repurposed an empty lot in Alphabet City and used it to give back to the community when the powers that be wouldn't even look their way. I'm also excited to have Gabriela here with us, Gabriela Sanchez, board member and volunteer at Carmen Pabón del Amanecer Garden. She has a lot to say about Pabon's history, the garden today, and how you can be involved. But before we get into that, I want to share some findings from the archive and from her collection, and then Gabriela will provide additional context. And if you have questions along the way, please add them into the chat and we'll get to them toward the end. So without further ado, let's get started. This is a very brief timeline of a long life that was full of many accomplishments. If we were to list all her accomplishments and what she did, we'd have to do part 2 and part 3. But this one is today's presentations related mostly with the garden. She was born in Ciales, Puerto Rico in 1921 or 1922. From the archive, it seemed like there was 2 birth certificates, so we're not really sure. We do have L.E.S Pabón, one of her daughters, in the chat I saw, so maybe she could clarify some of that information. So yeah, she was born in the mountains of Ciales and moves to New York around 1946. I think there was a time period where she moved back and then moved back to Puerto Rico, then came back to New York. But in 1955, she moves into the Lillian-Wald housing projects in the Lower East Side, and that was a result of winning the New York City housing lottery. 1984, she founds the El Bello Amanecer Borinqueño Garden, and this is the main part where she kind of, I think, starts a lot of her hands-on activism using the space. The backdrop of this is, early or 1970s, early 80s, New York City's community garden movement. So there were many vacant lots were converted into community gardens with homelessness and drug addiction running rampant in the Lower East Side. Pabón used these spaces to provide to the city's most vulnerable populations. She provided food, shelter, and clothing to people in need. But when she founded this first garden, she enlisted the help of neighbors to help dig out the rubble and to plant peach trees. They also built a casita where Pabón served food to the houseless or the unhoused and poor people who would line up in the morning with carts. The garden became a place for activism and poetry readings, and Pabón would even read her own poetry. So it became this really beautiful, urban oasis. But fast forward 1999, with the help of Mayor Giuliani, the community garden gets sold to a private developer, and they're essentially pushed out. And this back and forth with letters of support of the garden and all the good that she did with the garden. It didn't really matter. Capitalism won that round. But 2016, the Carmen Pabón del Amanecer Garden opens, and so from what I understand, it's the same garden, but it was kind of given back to her. And unfortunately, just a few weeks after cutting the ribbon, Miss Pabon passes away. But it's almost like the beautiful ending of, you know, she passed away with this garden in her name, and her legacy, will continue. And this next slide is about some of the things that I found in the archive, in her collection. There are letters that she wrote. I love seeing people's notes on things, on a plate, on napkins, on any piece of paper. You just have to write it down. There's tons of clippings of different newspapers, local to like broader publications that focused on Pabon's accomplishments and all the activism that she did. And there's pictures of her in the garden, of her when they demolished the garden in 1999. There's a photo album of that. So yeah, it's a really interesting information and primary source that we are lucky enough to have here at Centro. And I believe it was donated to us in 2022. And yeah, so that's like the brief outline of everything in relation to the collection. But what's really interesting is explaining, or what I want to explain, this new connection that we have with Gabriela. If I'm telling the story correctly, you can correct me if I mess up, but I believe you approached us about Pabon's papers and having an interest in digitizing the material, and using it for, the garden's website and whatnot. But the collection had not been processed yet. So with our archival collections manager, Christina, and I looked at all the unprocessed things that are in my queue of what's left to process here. And we saw that Pabon's collection wasn't too big of an ask. Like, I had just finished a like 30 something box collection, and this one was much smaller. So I did have time to kind of process that pretty quickly. But then we found, just like, it may be a small collection, but it is like packed with just like a wealth of information. And I think the next step is going to be to have Gabriela really join us here at Centro in digitizing some of that material and making it available for everyone. This will not only enhance knowledge and context around the collection, but it also marks a step for us at Centro to really bring in the community around our collection, and not just as end users, but as people participating in the process of processing archival materials. So I'm going to stop talking and pass it over to Gabriela, and let me know when you want me to move on to the next slide. Okay.
Oh, sure. Awesome. Thank you, Herbert. That was a beautiful overview and wonderful outline of what's to come. For those, Herbert already introduced me, but for those of you who don't know me, I see some friends and partners of the garden here, but my name is Gabriela Sanchez. I'm a volunteer and board member since August of 2022. And yeah, this relationship is a really happy accident opportunity. I came to the garden as a volunteer, and Inez and Caroline, who spearhead as board president and chairhead and treasurer, where like we need website, we want to get on board, we want to put our name out there and really have a digital footprint. And so I said, oh, great, we'll work on a website. And as I was doing research, there was very limited, there's lots of, obviously a lot of materials online, but no hard copy, things that I want to retrace down. Then that's when Inez was just like, oh, well, Centro has some boxes that you should go through. And here we are today, being able to really show some of the photographs and talk about the spirit of Carmen and her legacy. So with that being said, we can't talk about the garden today without going back. And I found some of the photos that were in those boxes that I wanted to pull out from Jardín Bello Amanecer Boriqueño, which is her original name, and from the original lot. She, as Herbert mentioned, found a lot that she wanted to transform for children and elderly community when nobody else was supporting and serving. she used the space as a headquarters of such, right? Her goal was not to just create a beautiful garden, which she did. It was to really provide a space that was both peaceful and also welcoming for all sorts of community connection. And this is where she operated from. As you can see, there was a plethora of events that happened. I think right in the corner picture is the casita that we all know from a lot of Puerto Rican gardens across the city. Her in the middle photo with Save the Lower East Side, she was known as an activist. Obviously, she was dubbed La Madrina de Lower East Side because she was everywhere and everything all at once for her community, in essence. And this is what she says. She said, "This is a little piece of Puerto Rico. I love it." She said in 1989. A little note about the name of the garden. She was interviewed for a book, The Struggle for Eden, and she said that she came up with the name on an early morning as she saw the sunrise, which is really beautiful. And it's really nice that we still maintain that. We have that essence in that name today of Carmen Pabón de Amanacer Garden. The original garden, correct me if I'm wrong, anyone in the chat, was about 4,000 square feet. She was able to set it up with support from Charas, which is a neighboring community group, and adopt a building to obtain a lease from Green Thumb. And so, and as Herbert said, with the help of volunteers and friends, she was able to really build it from scratch. I'll skip into the next part. We can go to the next slide.
Okay.
This is a wonderful photo of her with some other members of the community. I'm trying to identify them. So if family or anyone else knows who they are, please send them my way, because I would love to credit the individuals in the photograph. But in that same book, The Struggle for Eden, she basically outlined her week, right? So a week in the life of Carmen Pabón was Monday and Wednesday, Bible study and housing workshops, providing food, clothes, to the local pantry and local elderly community, group exercising, activities for the elderly. She was throughout the week, she was on the ground. And she was known to also be out and about from 7 in the morning until midnight, making herself available to anyone that she might come across. She was, translating for individuals that might not have strong English skills for forms and applications for city assistance and things of that nature. As Herbert said, her accolades can go on and on. There's one quote in one of the many, many articles that she was featured in of a small list of things that she helped do. So feed the homeless, collect clothes and blankets for them, service translator, counsel runaway teenagers, sweep the front steps of her church, perform in locally written plays, and writes poetry about her neighborhood. Part of that stack that you saw in the second slide or third slide that Herbert produced was all of her writing that she did. Inez, her daughter and president, would tell me about how she would find napkins and just write and scribble. And she was constantly writing and performing. And I think that's a beautiful way, like a beautiful mirror to her activist spirit and her activities in that side. And something that we can, still enjoy today was her print and her work in the arts. We can go into the next slide. So another thing that I wanted to highlight with the opportunity of presenting about Carmen and the garden was this kind of magnificent mural that we have featured in the garden. Its full name is called From One. I just have to move this for 1 second. From One Generation to Another, La Lucha Continua. You can't really see it, but if you were to look at the photo closely or should come in person, the name is actually written on one of the rays around the head of the sculpture. This was designed and built by John Pittman Weber in 1984. City Arts, previously City Arts Workshop, brought him on to create this mural. It is a huge sculpture of 30 by 40 feet. You cannot miss it. You'll see it when you're walking south on Avenue C, because the garden is in between two buildings now, and so it's between 7th and 8th, and you see it immediately. It is a freeform concrete with multicolored bands of stucco type of concrete and sgraffito, which is taking away layers of colored concrete to expose other colors within the the mural of itself. It's a one-of-a-kind piece, and it has a lot of motifs of Puerto Rican and Afro-Caribbean culture. You can see Taino imagery in it. There's a poem by, there's poems in here by Jose de Diego, written in Spanish. There's the map of Loisaida, and just so many different motifs in it that represent the surrounding community at the time. And it was just an incredible piece that ultimately helped save the garden back in 1999, because it was so incredible and such a monumental piece that they realized could not be taken down and destroyed. And so that helped really save the garden at the time. And we can go to the next slide like that. So this is the mural today. As you can see, this is colored, and it was obviously colored at the time too. I wanted to pull out a quote that I found in one of the articles by Councilmember Margarita Lopez at the time. She said, "This is our history, this is our mark. This is saying that the Puerto Rican community contributed to New York's beauty and humanity. Our contribution must be preserved." And she said that she was in the garden here with Carmen and a few other members of the garden. And so it truly helped keep the garden to what we have today. It's not nearly as big as it was when it was created by Carmen. We no longer have the casita, unfortunately. Would have loved to kept that in there. But the garden today is still a peaceful respite in the neighborhood and provides a beautiful space for people to come and relax and build community around. That being said, it's been 40 years of having this mural, and as glorious as it is, with time it has slowly deteriorated. The bottom is crumbling, and so our work right now is really working to help restore and repair the mural, hopefully maybe even landmark it at some point. And we are fundraising for it. So if after this you are interested in supporting, if anything about Carmen or this mural has inspired you, I would strongly encourage you to consider hopefully make a small donation to our mural restoration fund. Our goal is 50,000, and that encompasses everything from start to finish for mural restoration. And the links will be shared towards the end. But this is an incredible mural. It's helped the garden, it's helped Carmen, and we hope to keep it in the garden for as long as we possibly can and fight for its survival. With the next. So the garden today, we're thriving, alive and well. We have volunteers. We're community powered still. We are a 501c3 registered organization, which means that your donations and activities is tax deductible according to tax law. We have volunteers that come in every once in a while beyond our regular membership and board that help maintain the garden. We have events in the garden, knitting workshops, beading, poetry readings. You can see a musical performance here. Someone even got married in the garden a few years back, which was really special for us. And so we encourage, just like, we're also part of the network of Lungs and other. Lungs is specific to the Lower East Side, because there's the high concentration of gardens are there. But we're well connected with several coalitions, and we invite anyone that's interested in hosting any sort of community events to reach out to us and consider our garden to be the host of the event, because it's a really beautiful space and we can hold people and has a lot of rich history in performance. I think we can go to next slide. So Pabón's legacy, she will live on through the garden, obviously through her children and grandchildren. I think that this is one of the poems that was published in a magazine, the Loisaida magazine, rather. That I think it's one of my favorite things that she's written, and really speaks to her perspective and her attitude towards her activism and her impact to the community at large. So I encourage everyone, if you like to keep reading it, I think we'll publish it on our website at some point too, and find the article that's in the archives that we can scan and put up, because I think it's really wonderful. And that's really, she has touched countless lives. We probably won't be able to measure her impact because of how many people she impacted throughout her tenure in Lower East Side. And here we are today, still talking about her, still preserving her legacy, and really celebrating her. She was a well-rounded Renaissance woman, and I think that that is worth celebrating and continuing to share. Yeah. So what's next and how can you get involved? Please visit the garden. It's the most, if you find yourself, you're lucky enough to be on Avenue C, come into the garden during opening hours. Saturdays and Sundays from noon to 5 during the season, which is typically May through October. Someone will correct me if I'm wrong. Become a member. We are actively looking for members who are available to volunteer, or be involved in open shifts, to actually keep the garden open during the weekends, and do other activities as necessary. Sign up for volunteer days, and of course donate. We are actively fundraising for the Mill Restoration Fund, and all funds will go directly towards that. Our website, carmenpabon.org, visit at any time. We have our contact form there, which we actively check. Our email is carmenpabongarden@gmail.com. Please send us emails. And our Instagram is Carmen Pabón Garden. It's garden shortened, where you can follow us there. We are looking for volunteers that are eager to, not just garden, but be involved in the community and such. So that's where we're at today.
Awesome. Thank you so much for coordinating also, with me and Centro, and you came into Centro and looked through everything. So it's really awesome to see how cyclical this has been. It's not just, we process paper, we collect papers, process them, and then have them in the archive. It's it's being used, and with someone like you who has all this history, knowledge, and connections with the garden today, it's just cool to see how, things keep going. Yeah, I think I think to look at the questions, I have to stop sharing. So I'm gonna stop sharing. But maybe if we can drop the email in the chat or something, if it's not there already. Okay. Yeah, so at this point, if anyone has any questions, please drop them in. I kind of have a question for Gabriela. I think with the state of New York City politics and all that, and the ever-changing landscape, do you guys feel at this point, and by you guys I mean the garden, kind of threatened by any, zoning or rezoning or anything like that?
Yeah. So we're in an interesting, and I'm glad you brought this up, because you kind of questioned at the top of your conversation about our law and our lease and whatnot. And we're in an interesting kind of position where our land is leased from that developer that ended up purchasing from auction and developing a residential building. So we're not typically, or what you'll see from a lot of community gardens, is that they have leases from the city, 99-year leases. And we received our 99-year lease, I believe 99, from the developer. We can, and he ultimately does have ownership over that, and can revoke our lease at any time within reason that he believes. And so that is something that we always think about and keep in the back of our mind, and want to make sure that we are maintaining the garden to a standard and are able to provide programs for the community to ensure that that isn't, we don't feel threatened in that nature. But that is a reality for a lot of gardens. And I know that right now the as administration is looking at lots and vacancies. Maybe there are vacancies, but they are looking at other places that other gardens and such that they're to kind of rebuy or uptake to the garden. So not right now on our end, we're pretty much safe, but yeah, unfortunately it's a reality for other gardens.
Yeah, and I see Alejandro wrote in the chat, Lungs, which you mentioned earlier, is 13th Annual Harvest Arts Festival is September 20th through the 29th.
Yeah. Alejandro, thank you. Yeah, so that is Lungs is a network that we are very close to, and it's specific to Loisaida. And there will be several events throughout the week from the 20th to the 29th. We have one next Sunday, it's actually this Saturday, knitting and sketching in the garden, as well as another beading workshop next week. But throughout the week, if you search Lungs, there is a list, a plethora of artistic events throughout the week that you can go. It's free, it's open to the community. You don't need to bring anything, just yourself and a lovely open attitude to it. And I highly encourage it because a lot of these events are incredible. And please go. Thank you, Alejandro.
I have a question. I'm going to answer live. I don't really know what that means. Did Carmen collaborate with any of the casitas or gardens in El Barrio?
Well, she was very involved with, she had an imprint on so many different activities in the community. I know Chadas was a big partner of hers, and she was very close to them. And she was constantly coordinating with her local council members and going to town hall events and going to city hall and marching to DC when there were big activities going on. In terms of specific casitas and other ones, I would have to go back to our leadership, like to people that were around at the time to see exactly a little bit more nuanced relationships on that end. But I'm absolutely sure that he was.
I have another question. With the designation of Loisaida being called the Garden District, not sure if that is an official title, is there any way to combat against the said rezonings via actual planning legislations? For example, like a special purposes district?
I think those are conversations happening right now across a lot of different local organizations. I can't speak to that exactly. Do I want to participate in that and make sure that happens? Like, that's part of my participation in the garden, is ensuring that these spaces are preserved. And so, yes, I'm not personally leading that charge. Will I participate? Absolutely. And we're actively looking to make sure that happens, whatever it takes to preserve these spaces. I can assure you that the community, especially in Lower East Side, will find a way.
Evilise in the chat wrote, what got you interested in getting involved with the garden?
So I am born and raised New Yorker, raised on Avenue C, just 2 blocks from the garden. And so, growing up, I always thought it was, when you grow up, whatever your surroundings are, you think are normal, and you think that, all of New York is surrounded by gardens and everyone has these gorgeous spaces all around them. And so I was very privileged in that capacity. And but more importantly, growing up, you go and you pop in, and there's always a beautiful third space, especially as a young person, right? You go after school, you go to the garden. In summertime, you go to the garden. And we were kind of always looking, my mother was always kind of looking for a garden to become a member to, and they were all they're sometimes difficult. Sometimes you don't really mesh well with others, or, sometimes they have different goals that aren't really aligned, which is perfect. It's great, right? There's a garden for everybody in the area and across New York. But 2 years ago, I was walking down Avenue C on my lunch break. The garden gates were open and I popped in. And that's when I met L.E.S. And I was like, this is a public garden, right? And she was like, absolutely. This was my mother's garden. She gave me her whole spiel. I so enthusiastically welcomed me so warmly. She was like, we don't have no plots. We're a community space. Everything is shared. If you're willing to join, come join. We are no fuss, and we're looking for active members. And I thought, absolutely. And I've been with them ever since, and it's been so lovely.
It's amazing. That's real cool. We did get a question on, I want to see the collection. How can I see them? And I believe Kimberly just dropped the link to our visitation form. So yeah, we do have a link to we do have a visitation form to help plan spacing for the reading room. So we have we like to make sure that things are ready for the patrons when they come in, and that everyone has enough space to work on their projects when they're here. And please come and see it. It's we talked a lot about it, but there's things that we obviously missed. There's, her work trying to save St. Brigid Church in the Lower East Side, and come read through her poems, all that. And there's photo book. It's really cool. I have an additional question before, unless anyone else has another one. But what kinds of things do volunteers get to do when they volunteer at the garden?
I mean, we are always, so we're either, replacing soil, doing a lot of weeding. There's so much weeding to be done that never ends. We are, I wouldn't say hedging, but we're cleaning up a lot of the sides of the flower beds that we have. We are constantly, we're the downside of being a garden in the city is that trash flows in, and we get a lot of that constantly. Either people throw it in on purpose or the wind blows it in by accident. We're always cleaning up. There's always cleanup to be done, and it's things like that. It's pruning. It's always the volunteers are led by either a member or another volunteer that is already experienced, and the flowers that we have and the trees or other plants that with expertise on that front. So volunteers never, it's always changing, and there's always things to do. Cleanup is probably the biggest one, but it was really enjoyable. The space is, it's a very comfortable space because it doesn't feel overwhelming in size, but it's very homey and inviting and cozy, if you will, but still large enough to feel like to have such a diverse amount of flowers and other fauna and things, which is really great.
Another question: are you using resources of the Girls Club as young volunteers? So yeah, I kind of was wondering, do you guys partner with other organizations that do maybe a staff thing at the garden and helping?
We do. We partner with Loisaida Inc. is one of our I don't know if biggest, strongest partner is the best way to put it, but we're very close to them in terms of just like community support and whatnot. We also partner with Girls Inc. We did back in the day quite a bit. They even Girls Inc. was able to interview Carmen Pabón back when she was still with us. And so that lives on their website, and it's really nice. And anyone that's interested in that can go to our website, and it's linked at the bottom in the press section. But yes, we do partner with Girls Inc. and we'll continue to tap them when we have large events and things of that nature.
And I'm interested in how the garden is used with performances, arts and culture, with the community. Can you say a little bit more about this?
Sure. So as I mentioned, we're a public community garden, and so we are always open and willing to host events as people request them. Our garden members are the ones that have been hosting more events lately. As I said, there are lots of artistic ones like knitting and beading and sketching in the garden and utilizing our surroundings to inspire that art form rather. But if anyone's interested in hosting an event, they can contact us via the website, their form, or just by email, letting us know that they want to host something. And past performances have been poetry readings and musical performances. I would stray away from anything that has to do with food, really, because it's a public space, the garden, and attracting of not so friendly creatures that we don't really want around. But a lot of successful events have been really around the arts, and we really encourage anyone to consider hosting their next event there, because it's a beautiful space and it's just a matter of an email. We're pretty friendly and we're not scary. Just email us.
And then have you written any proposals for funds for the mural?
We have.
Yeah.
We have written, we've received. So as I said, our goal is 50,000. We've already raised 16,000. So we want to raise that remaining funds before the end of the year, because we need to get started as soon as possible, particularly because of the weather. Working in cold weather will will make it more difficult to work with concrete. If you know anything about materials and temperatures, it all matters. And so we really want to get it done, but also because it's, you know, we don't, if the mural is threatening to collapse, we don't want it to collapse. We want to preserve it before anything happens, to get ahead of it and ensure that it's safe. And I mean, it's safe now, I assure you, but we do want to do it now while we can and be proactive with it. If that answers your question. We have written funds and we're actively applying to more grants.
Cool. Yeah, so I kind of wanted to also ask, what is, I guess, your favorite, is there a favorite part of the garden, one of your favorite parts of the garden, like a flower or you know, I don't know, like something that really stands out to you that you really like?
I mean, I love whenever I'm in the garden, if I'm not like working in the garden, there's is really lovely large like garden table in the back where you can sit and just see out front and through the back, and you kind of have a perfect view of it. And we also have like this gazebo type structure where you can relax even when it's like pouring raining in the garden. It's, you know, sometimes like the spring and summer days when it's pouring, you can just get like sit inside and enjoy that. I've gotten caught in the rain a few times and I feel fine. It feels like such a luxury to have that. And so, and you know, it's always funny when it's like pouring and people are looking for shelter, and you find yourself with people running into the garden and staying in there, which is always a really nice moment. But honestly, and this might be kind of basic, but we have a huge lavender plant right up front that like welcomes you, and you cannot help but just like kind of grab a little bit to get the oils out and like smell it, and you might like steal like a little sprig once in a while, and it just like reminds you like just to have it with me, and it reminds me of the garden all the time. So there's like the little moments, and we also have a little pond with some fish in there, and the birds come and drink from it. We have a bird bath. The rotation of flowers is always changing, and that's the best for any garden. And so any season that you come, it's going to look different, and that's what it's also really attractive of it, and should keep you coming back for more.
Awesome. I think with that, everyone who's on the chat should, or watching, should definitely go and visit the garden. Please help out if you can with the mural, or share with your you know, your contacts, and visit them on Instagram. I think this was a great lunch hour. Thank you all for sharing lunch with us. Thank you, Gabriela, again, for being a great collaborator throughout this. Yeah, and before we leave, Centro also has an open house this Thursday. It starts at 3 p.m. Please come visit here at Silberman. We have the screening of The Five Demands at 6 p.m. So if you can't make that, please make sure to try to see the screening, which is followed by a panel. And I think all the links are down in the chat. So unless you have anything else to say, I just want to say thank you to Gabriela again. And
Thank you. No, I just want to say thank you so much for supporting the garden and helping us share Carmen Pabón's legacy. I couldn't be more proud to share her information and her details and her story. So thank you for having me.